Today we're talking about public speaking. This is a critical skill for the business professional. There's many types of public speaking. Of course, there are formal presentations. There are smaller, more boardroom type presentations. And as I'm going to argue today, there's also things that we normally don't think of as presentations, just conversation with colleagues, maybe a phone call with a client. I would contend that any time that you are speaking in public, you have in effect a public presentation. And so while I will give you tips today that are targeted specifically towards traditional public speaking, the ability to stand in front of a group of people and command an audience, I encourage you to think about these tips in a much broader way. Think about them as ways to improve your presence and the way you interact with people on a daily basis. Because again, as you leave your house in the morning, you are entering the public sphere and you are becoming a public speaker. So as I've coached many students and executives through the Mays Business School in public speaking, this is something that I've probably had the opportunity to have more impact on my students than any other thing that I teach, and that is public speaking. People can get better pretty quickly through targeted practice and help with public speaking, and it's such a critical skill, such a critical skill. So I want to give you some tips today, many of which you've probably heard before, some of which you might not have heard before. The first tip is I think that you should, any time you're standing in front of a group of people, you should ask yourself, why am I delivering my message in this particular context? There are many communication mediums, many ways to deliver a message. We often do it in writing, email, texting, reports, a phone call, a number of ways. But when you're standing in front of a group of people, ask yourself, why are we choosing to communicate in this way? Why am I choosing to deliver my message in this context? And more importantly, what does this particular context allow me to do? What kind of tools does this give me to allow me to more effectively deliver my message? Unfortunately, most speakers deliver in a way that almost sounds like we've come together to read together. Maybe there's bullet points after bullet points after bullet points, and we're all just sort of reading slides together. This is not a very effective way to present to your audience. You're missing the opportunity. And I want to go to an author who I read a lot, and that's Gar Reynolds, the author of Presentation Zen, for a couple of quotes. Presentation Zen is a terrific book. It's primarily about PowerPoint and other slideware, but it also is about many different ways of more effectively presenting. So I recommend that book. But Gar Reynolds says we are storytellers. And this is true. Even in a formal business presentation, if you infuse your delivery with a sense of telling a story, a more engaging kind of delivery to your audience, I think it will be more effective. But Gar Reynolds also writes that unfortunately most presenters prepare their talks only by gathering information and facts. They never frame the purpose of their talks in terms of impacting a change in the audience. And that's it. Again, I think most people get so concentrated on their information, their facts, their talking points, that they forget that the real purpose of a presentation is to impact people, is to inspire people, is to make people want to hear what's next. These are the tools that you have at your disposal by virtue of the fact of giving a presentation. You don't have that opportunity in writing. Maybe in some way you certainly can impact people in writing, but not quite the same way as you can with a live audience, where you can interact with them, you can use your vocal qualities, you can show your enthusiasm, you have body language. All these things are at your disposal. And so I encourage you to always remember that. Anytime you're preparing a talk, getting ready to get up in front of people to make a presentation, think about what is this context and what are my opportunities here and how can I impact these people today? I think that's number one. Number two, and this you get this anywhere, any public speaking advice, practice. You just have to practice, practice, practice. There's just no getting around it. The more you do this, the better you get at it. And the more you put yourself in the position, the better you feel when you're standing in front of a group of people. The more aware you are of the room, the more you're able to remember your message, the more you're able to impact people. Practice, practice, practice. And I mean this in two specific ways. One, if you have a presentation, especially if it's an important one, remember to practice, rehearse your presentation. You don't want to be the actual talk to be the first time you've given it. If you possibly can, deliver a rehearsal in the room where the talk is going to be delivered. so that you get a feel for where people are sitting and how it feels to be in that particular venue. So rehearse. Now be careful of over-rehearsing. I think sometimes people over-rehearse and they end up delivering in a stiff, sort of speechifying, dry, memorized sounding voice. You don't want that, but you should practice. Now, I also mean practice in a different way, and that is never ever turn down an opportunity to stand in front of people and deliver. The more you do it, the better you get at it. And I don't care who the audience is, what the situation is. It could be your child's elementary school class. Just do it. Just look for those opportunities. Think about Toastmasters if you're not an effective public speaker. Any way you can find to get practice, you will get better. Okay? Next, I think you should practice with conscious intention. Anytime you get up in front of people, say, hey, here's another opportunity for me to practice getting better at this essential skill. There's a lot of research that supports the fact that doing something with intention improves our performance. If I am intending to get better at public speaking and I look at this as an opportunity, I'm consciously intending to do that, it will be better practice for me. We find this in a number of ways. I have my students, for example, prepare something I call an individual communication development plan, an ICDP, where they chart their own course. They take a hard look at where am I as a communicator, where do I want to get to, and how am I going to get there. That act of sort of codifying the plan, writing it down, thinking it through, actually is already making them improve. And I think it's the same thing with public speaking. If you'll just have that conscious intention, today I'm going to get a little bit better, you will. My next tip is to deliver with enthusiasm. Unfortunately, too often presenters have this idea that the terms professional and enthusiastic are somehow mutually exclusive. Not true. You can retain a professionalism and also an enthusiasm, and I think you really should. The worst thing you want, of course, or the last thing you want is a dry, sort of monotone voice. It sounds like you don't care what you're talking about. You want to bring out an enthusiasm and an energy to your delivery. You want to infuse your voice with that unmistakable sound of someone who cares about what they're saying. You know, if you don't care about what you're saying, your audience is not going to care either. So really fill your voice with that sound of, I've got something for you today and I want you to get it too. I'm really enthused about my message. I'm bringing a lot of energy to it. But at the same time, you want to deliver with natural vocal qualities. You don't want to deliver in a way that's kind of speechifying. People don't want to be speechified to. And I've encountered so many executives in my career who are excellent conversationalists, very good one-on-one, they're articulate people. They get up to give a presentation and they break into speech mode. They get into this formal, unnatural kind of voice. People don't want that. People, even in a formal setting, of course, if it's a formal setting, you need to bring up the formality a little bit, but still, talk to people in a natural way. One way to think about this is eye contact. It's a very traditional, typical tip for effective presentations, right? You want to make eye contact with people. But it's kind of odd when you think about it that way. If I'm concentrating on making eye contact, then I might end up with this sort of mechanical, unnatural sort of eye contact. Instead of that, if I will just talk to people in a natural way, both with my voice and my mannerisms and the way I'm interacting with people, I'm just in a natural mode, then I will naturally talk to people. I will naturally make eye contact with people. That's how humans interact. So if you just deliver in this with enthusiasm but in a natural voice, I think your presentations will be much better. You must attend to issues of body language. Body language enhances or detracts from your message. We actually communicate with our body language, and this is a critical skill. We'll dive a little deeper into that in a minute. Last on my list here is anxiety. It's really amazing how often people have fear over public speaking. Statistics actually show that most Americans fear public speaking more than they fear cancer. It's really kind of interesting if you think about it. But so many people do have anxiety over public speaking, so you've got to deal with this one way or another. I have a few tips for you, okay? Because I know from working with countless students and executives that this really is one of people's biggest fears, is public speaking. And so how do you deal with that? Well, number one, practice, practice, practice. Again, this is how you overcome anxiety. One of the best ways is you just put yourself there over and over again. Eventually, you will start feeling more comfortable. So again, just like I said earlier, don't ever turn down an opportunity to stand in front of people and deliver. You'll get better. You'll also get more confident. You'll lose some of that anxiety. And try to make your focus on the audience itself. I think what happens to a lot of people who get nervous over public speaking, they're so inward, they're so focused on themselves and their message, and they start becoming hyper aware of their body language and oh my gosh, I'm sweating and my voice is quivering. Try to put your focus on the audience themselves. Almost look at it as sort of an act of service, that I'm here today to give you something. I have something that these people need and I want them to get it. And try to make them your focus. This is something that will benefit you in many ways because your body language will be better, you'll be more connected to your audience, and you'll be less nervous because you're less inward focused, you're less worried about, kind of focused on your message and on yourself, and more focused on your audience. Next, kind of related to that, is open up. This is one of my top tips with respect to public speaking. You've got to open up, and I mean this in many ways. I mean it in terms of, for example, breathing. Too often people have this, because they're nervous, they're closed up and they have shallow breaths because their chest cavity is literally restricted. If you'll take some deep breaths and open up that chest cavity, it has a tendency to relax you a little bit. Also open up with respect to your body language. You don't want some sort of closed body language, you want it to be open and inviting. And also open up with respect to being more aware of the room, aware of people, interacting with them. We'll talk a little more about that later as well. Face your fears. I think too often people try to deny that they're nervous. They pretend they're not nervous. They have a voice inside their heads that says, you're not nervous, you're not nervous, I'm not going to be nervous, I'm not going to let myself be nervous. They're just denying reality, and it doesn't work. It actually, I think, makes it worse. Because the problem is not that you're nervous. The problem is that you're nervous about the fact that you're nervous. And then you're nervous about that. And you suddenly just end up in this almost hall of mirrors of nervousness. I think if you will just accept that you're nervous, face it, face your fears and say, I'm just going to accept the fact that I'm nervous, I'm going to look at it, I'm not going to deny it, I think you'll be much better off. I really do. The one analogy I like to think of is turning into the skid. If any of you who've driven on snow and ice, you know that if you skid in your car, that the advice is actually to turn into the skid, even though that's counterintuitive. Your mind says, I don't want to go there. I want to go away from there, so you try to turn away from the skid, and that just makes it worse. Similarly with your fears over public speaking. If you try to turn away from them, deny that you're afraid, I think you actually are just exacerbating it and you're making it worse. I think the best thing to do is turn into those fears, face those fears, and admit that you're a little bit nervous. Now the magic about that is if you will give yourself a break, admit that you're nervous, and be okay with it, don't beat yourself up about it, allow yourself the luxury of being nervous, the magic is that you get less nervous. And it's a pretty cool thing. It seems counterintuitive, it seems sort of ironic, but by allowing yourself the luxury of being nervous, you actually become less nervous. Just don't beat yourself up about it. Just let yourself be nervous a little bit. Don't worry. It's much more amplified in your head than it is in your audience's head. They don't hear your voice quivering quite as much as you hear it quivering inside your own head, etc. So try that. Now, next we've got to talk about body language. Body language is absolutely one of the critical elements of public speaking. The kind of body language signals that we send to our audience really does enhance or detract from our message. We communicate with our body. It's not just the words we're saying. It's tone of voice, it's our body language itself. So this is a really important element to talk about. Here are some traditional sort of bad body language postures. You see first we have the fig leaf. And that psychologists tell us that this shows we're timid, we're inexperienced, we're feeling vulnerable. And by the way, this slide comes from an excellent book called The Exceptional Presenter by Tim Cagle. I recommend the book. The next posture is hands in pockets. And that sends a signal that you're a little too nonchalant, you're passive, you're overconfident. Then we have parade rest. This says I'm sheepish, I'm withholding something. Now, I don't have a whole lot against this body language if it's for short periods of time, but if you give your entire presentation with your hands behind your back, it's a little weird, isn't it? And it also is missing out on the opportunity to use your hands in an effective way. Then we have the hands on the hips. That clearly is saying I'm sort of defiant, I'm overbearing. You don't want to send that signal to your audience. Then there's finally the arms crossed. And that signal says that I am closed off, I'm restrained, And you see that most of these are very closed type of body languages. We want to open up our body language. I invite you to think about who is a public speaker you know who has excellent body language. I think everyone should find several favorites of their own. And it's not to slavishly impersonate anyone. You've got to find your own style. But it's great to find people who you admire and say, you know, I kind of like the way he did this. For me, one of the speakers that I look to who I think has effective body language is Steve Jobs. I think Jobs really commanded a room well. And if you'll watch his presentations, he has very open body language. He's very engaged. He moves around the stage very well. I think he's an excellent model, but I encourage you to find your own. Now, there's something I want to share with you that's just really amazing research about body language. Body language definitely communicates with your audience, and you need to think about it. But it turns out that body language also has an effect on your own physiology. In a way, your body language communicates with your own brain, and it can change your actual body chemistry. It's very strange, but if you think about it, think about the animal kingdom. When an animal is feeling powerful, feeling confident, what does an animal do? It opens up, it gets bigger. So a cobra opens up its hood, or the bird spreads its wings and it ruffles its feathers. It's trying to make itself look bigger. Grizzly bear might stand on its hind legs, maybe the fur kind of raises. Animals tend to make themselves look bigger when they're feeling aggressive. What is the opposite? An animal who's feeling vulnerable, insecure, actually turns away. They make themselves look smaller. Now, this team of researchers looked at this and they said, we know that these postures are as a result of a feeling. The bird is feeling aggressive, and so his posture shows it. The dog is feeling vulnerable, and so his posture shows it. But I wonder, is there a loop effect? Does the posture itself somehow loop back and reinforce that feeling? And it turns out that it does. Really fascinating research on this. A group took a sample or took a group of people, and they put them through a series of tests. And most of these were red herrings. They had nothing to do with what they were looking for, but they threw the people off so they wouldn't know what was being tested here. All throughout this day, they took saliva samples. Why? They were checking two hormone levels. They were checking testosterone, which is a hormone level that indicates that feeling of aggression, of power, of feeling confident. And they checked cortisol levels as well. That's the stress hormone. I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling vulnerable. They put them through a series of tests, and they checked these hormone levels before and after. And the results were just amazing. They took half of the people at one point during the day, and they put them in what they called high-power poses. One is sitting in a desk with your feet up on the chair, or sitting in the chair with your feet up on the desk, and here's two presidents in the Oval Office clearly feeling powerful, the leaders of the free world, right? Another powerful pose was standing with one hand on the desk or standing with two hands on the desk. So they asked half of the participants in this test to hold that posture, hold that power pose, and hold it for 3 minutes, just a mere 3 minutes. And they checked the hormone levels before and after they had held these postures. The other half of the group, they put them in low power poses. Here's a woman standing with her arms behind her back, her legs crossed back in the corner. Here's a guy with his arms crossed. He's closed off. He's restrained. He's feeling defensive, clearly. He's looking down. They checked these hormone levels before and after. And again, just 3 minutes of holding this pose. And here's what they found. Those who held the high power poses for 3 minutes, their testosterone levels actually went up by an average of 19%. While their cortisol levels, their stress hormone, went down by a full 25% on average. They're feeling less stressed, they're feeling more powerful merely because they adopted a particular posture and held it for a few minutes. On the other hand, those in the low power poses were affected just the opposite. Their testosterone went down by 10% on average, their cortisol went up by 17%. This is really remarkable. It says that the way we stand, our posture, communicates to people, but it also changes our own body chemistry. It changes the way our mind is thinking about how we're feeling. And so my advice to my students is, at all costs, avoid those low power poses. If you're nervous about public speaking and you close off, you cross your arms, you look down, not only are you sending signals of vulnerability to your audience, you're also making yourself, on a chemical level, feel less confident. So avoid those low power poses. Now the high power poses, this comes with a little bit of caution here, because I think we have to be careful with this. Though they do make us feel more powerful, we don't want to be that guy. And here's the Donald standing in a high power pose. We know that the Donald is all about aggression, about intimidation. We don't want to present in that way, clearly. What I advise my students and my executives to do if they have a big presentation coming up, find a private space beforehand, a few minutes beforehand, and adopt a power pose and hold it. And know that you're making yourself, on a chemical level, a little more confident. And then enter the room, have an open kind of body posture, okay? So I think this is valuable advice. Now to just summarize, remember context. Remember that the situation of a public presentation is much different than writing, for example. Don't forget the things that are at your disposal by virtue of the fact that you're with people. You have eye contact, you have vocal qualities, you have body language, you have your own natural enthusiasm, which tends to inspire people. Try to impact your audience. Look at the main objective of your talk, not as delivering your content. That's almost secondary. I think number one should be, I am somehow going to impact my audience today. It may be in some small way. They may not be walking out of the room feeling like their lives have profoundly changed, but try to impact them. Try to make them really feel it. Make them want to hear what's next. Engage them, inspire them. And one of the ways you do that is by cultivating an enthusiasm with yourself. Deliver in a way, again, that sounds like, I care about my message. I have something that I want you to have today, and I want to give it to you. Really cultivate that sense of enthusiasm. And then again, practice, practice, practice. There's no substitute for it. Practice, practice, practice. Whether that's Toastmasters or just seeking out opportunities, find ways to do this more and more and more. And do so with conscious intention. Really set out with a plan of, I want to improve my public speaking. You might make a list of things you think you do well, things maybe you don't do so well, and observe yourself. Videotaping yourself is a terrific way to have that practice with a conscious intention, where you look at a videotape of yourself presenting, you kind of make note of what do you think you did well, what didn't you do so well, and then the next time you give a talk, videotape it again. Did I improve in those dimensions? Remember, no speechifying. People really appreciate it if you talk to them in a natural voice. Yes, it might be more formal than a conversation, but try to have that sound of the human voice talking, that natural sound, no speechifying. My number one advice to people with respect to public speaking is to open up. I really think this is an important metaphor. Open your body language, open your vocal qualities so that you project, open your awareness of the room, connect with people, really look at people, be aware of what's going on with them, try to read their signals, because often your audience will tell you how you're doing. But you've got to be open to that. Get out of your own head a little bit, open up, do it for your audience, project yourself, and I think you'll be a much better public speaker. I'm going to close with a quote from Tim Cagle, and his book, The Exceptional Presenter, is subtitled, by the way, Open Up and Own the Room. And Cagle says, every time you open your mouth to speak in public, you are a public speaker. And this is absolutely true. Every day of your life, as you leave your house and you enter the public sphere, you are a public speaker. So attend to that. Think about that. Cultivate this ability to give a speech, to present, make a business presentation, to present to people. And that will carry over into all aspects of your life. You'll be a better conversationalist. You'll be a better parent. You'll be a better leader. And I think there's just almost no substitute for improving your ability to stand in front of a room and command that room. So I encourage you to work on that. Thank you so much.